Energy is inherently a part of everything we do in our lives, but one of the least understood things.
By giving people agency around their energy, around power, you are giving them power.
This is a moment in time with technological advancement that allows for humans to take advantage of the free aspect of energy.
I can see a future where there is limitless and free energy. And that's a pretty beautiful world to live in.
You know, I think one of the interesting things about whenever you and I talk is there's always this like really big picture idea and then also this like smaller on the micro idea. And I feel like it's hard to jump between one and the other. But where have you kind of learned that aspect of being able to jump between one and the other? Because I think having the vision of both and then holding on to one at a time and being able to focus is huge.
Freaking amazing question, dude. I mean, there's this spider web of concepts that I could talk about based on that one question. It's pretty broad. I'm just going to start riffing.
Yeah.
I have found, I was just thinking this the other day. I'm like, I probably could have been a psychologist and enjoyed it. Now, I'm obviously, like that's not what I was meant to do. And I'm really, really diving in deeply these days into what my personal core purpose is. Like, what is my purpose in life? Like, obviously, I've been living it to some extent, and I want to start working from a perspective of, I have a coach that's talking about, and you'll meet him and you'll work with him as well. A triangle where we tend to put action at the top, and like our purpose is on the bottom. And so we're taking action, working like towards like our purpose versus inverting that and being like, everything I do starts with my purpose, my why, and then drills down into where my action is just a result of that. Like it's, there's a lot to that we won't get into here. But anyway, the thing that I've come to find is that I spend a lot of time thinking through what motivates people. I think being a good leader is about figuring out what makes people tick and how they, what their natural drivers are, how to feed that while also making it line up well with what is the highest, best use currently for that person's, natural talent and stuff. But in that vein, I do a lot of self-analysis. Like I'm really interested in understanding like I'm coming to realize that we think we have a lot of say over how we show up in the world. And we do from a basic kind of like a tactical level, but ultimately we are who we are. And I realize that as I've been, kind of talking about this idea that businesses or organizations are actually organisms, and we got to look at them that way. And as you do, you start to see the real life and potential of it. But I think that all life on planet Earth is actually an organism that is not separate. We're not individuals separate. We're all interacting with everything all the time. And so therefore, it seems to me that the universe has made us very, very intrinsically unique, but in a way at which balances. Like if we really act out of our purpose and out of our core of who we really are and are open to understanding that, our strengths and weaknesses and so on, that it becomes a little bit more enjoyable because you realize how much you do depend on and rely on others, not because they work harder than you or because they're smarter than you, but we're just all different. It's necessary. We're all necessary, right? So one of the things I've come to realize, and I read this not long ago, that it's incredibly rare to be able to, and I'm finally getting to your question. My deep analysis of myself has led me to reading lots and lots about personality types and psychology, and then realizing that I'm on the dyslexic spectrum, which tends to really just mean that you're more right here, hemispherical brain thinker activity, whatever, than left. And that it's pretty rare to be able to be very iterative between macro and micro, like in like very quick, like or running both simultaneously. That's pretty rare. However, those that do tend to be good entrepreneurs or tend to be good leaders, whatever. I used to feel a little bit weird about talking about my strengths to people because it's just like, I don't want to boast, but then I realized I'm not boasting. I was born this way. I don't, I just got lucky enough to uncover this as a strength as opposed to feeling like it's a weakness that for most of my, youth, I basically felt like I was useless. I couldn't get through school well. I didn't fit sitting in a classroom all day and stuff. And so I don't feel like, um, I don't feel prideful when I say, like, here's my strengths. This is what I'm uniquely good at because I know a whole lot of stuff I'm not good at, right? But I'm also understanding that it's not because of anything I'm doing. It's just I was born this way. And I think that the more time we spend as human beings uncovering or being honest with ourselves about those things that we're just born with, and that the universe actually intends us to be different, and we should know that about each other. So I'm actually exploring that at the leadership level of the company and eventually across everybody in the company, which is there's this really cool personality profile that is actually geared for business and understanding roles and things that I'm mapping for the entire leadership team so we can all see where we fit in that and how we communicate and how we approach problems and what that looks like and how we counterbalance each other and stuff. So I love your question because it touches on all of that. I think that I naturally see the world from a high level, like big picture, right? I'm what you might call intuitive, or where I'm like kind of up in the ethers in my thinking a lot of the time, right? A lot of the time that I spend thinking or processing for where this company is going is, a year, 2, 3, 4 years out from where we are is like my reality. Like literally, I communicate from 3 years out, and it's hard for people sometimes because that is where I live. And so as I speak, I'm speaking as if it's now, and that's part of a manifestation process that I do. It's part of just kind of making things happen. But then every once in a while, I realize, oh shoot, I'm freaking talking like it's now because it's now for me, but it's 3 years from now for that for reality. And so I think I'm also though very driven to tinker and I like the fix it now, take action now. Like I'm a very, I don't want to say impatient. I'm just, and maybe the word's impulsive, but I just like to take action and figure it out along the way. I don't like to. So on one hand, I'm planning and imagining 3 years out and trying to reverse engineer how to get there, but it's not a very, I get stuck in trying to turn that into a static plan. What I like to
Yeah.
do is pick a direction, and as long as I'm headed the right direction, I don't care what kind of twists and turns and ups and downs it takes to get there. And so I think that being okay with that, or deciding that that was what was required in order to be effective at my job, both in my previous company, this company, and other things I've coached and led and done in my life, allowed me to get some practice there. And I think some of us end up in roles or positions or things in life where it doesn't allow for that practice of the things that we're great at. And not everybody's great at that macro, micro reflectivity. Um, that's just a different, it's just a certain personality and brain type that does it, right? And so I found that I do that well. And I think and I've read that that's a rare thing to be able to do. And that, but again, I don't want to take credit for it. It's just something I got okay with and started building reps on. And
Where does that
so
work when it like I think part of this is guiding your actual purpose. Like the core of all this is kind of your purpose of what you're like, hey, this is what I was born to do. Here's my skill set. Here's how I can show up in the world. How do you arrive at that though? Because I mean, could you have known when you were younger that you were going to be sitting right here? Probably not. And so, like, is it one of those things where it just goes, hey, go in the forest, go on a few walks, and spend some time with yourself, figure it out, or is it get out there and have those
dude,
really uncomfortable things
bro,
happen where
I
you
mean, I
really
don't know
learn
if,
about yourself?
yeah, I don't know if it's that like a lot changed for me. And I thought a lot changed for me every time I had a big growth moment, but a lot changed for me at 50 for whatever reason. It wasn't like an overnight thing. It was just, I feel different in my 50s. I'm getting more patient and I'm a little bit more okay with things. My whole life has been about affecting change, and I'm still very committed to inspiring positive change. In fact, that's what I claim my core purpose is as a human being. That may evolve over time, but that's currently what I perceive it to be. Um, and so I think to answer your question, I would with this 50-year-old wisdom, I look back and I go, gosh, if somebody could have identified which a lot of science has gone into now. The different types of personalities and brains and the way we process, and just there's just variations on a theme. But my natural variation on the theme was very much non-conform. It didn't fit the paradigm for early education, or for typical behavioral management for adults and children, and so I was a troublemaker and a rebel and can't it's ADD. I don't even think they called it ADD back then, but whatever, right? Um, well, knowing what they know now, there's a lot of schools out there that are like identifying that, and they're going, "Oh, that's a tactile learner, that's an experiential learner, that's um, a creative person. Let's give them these tools, let's set them up in this way, and let's let them thrive." And I'm like, damn it, what would that have looked like for me? Well, for one, it would have definitely saved me a lot of like freaking pain and suffering. However, if I sit here now and I go, wait, I think part of who I am right now is a result of having gone through so much struggle, which built up grit. And in order to start a company or be courageous where others are fearful in leadership, those kind of things, it just takes getting beat up along the way. So, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, well, maybe I don't wish anything was different. I'm just me because of all of the experience. And so that's another, a spiritual practice I'm getting into, is just deep, deep acceptance, of just things as they are,
I've been
and not,
thinking about it a lot
you
as
know,
like if you can build 1% better every day in whatever category. It doesn't have to be the work category. It doesn't have to be the personal category. You don't have to do all these crazy changes. I've always viewed it as like it's that idea of like a compounded growth of like an investment. It's like you just over time you chip away at it. Things will be bad, things will be good, but overall, if the trend is in the right direction, you're kind of going to go in the right direction. That's how I've always kind of looked at it. And I think like we don't zoom out enough on the timeline of whether it's our lives or even like a business or what's happening in society. Like none of that gets really zoomed out on. And we're always in this micro moment of like, what does this look like? But when you look at the course of our lives, 1 month is barely anything. It can be a
well,
pivotal month, but it's small.
you're bringing up some interesting stuff, right? So, like, one of the most brilliant people that ever lived, Einstein was just like, if he said something to the extent of like, if you could really conceive of the power of compounding, you'd understand it's like the strongest force in the universe, something like that, right? Well, I mean, anybody that understands money and investment or math or whatever understands compounding interest or compounding growth, or what they in some spaces call geometric growth, but where it's not arithmetic, that geometric growth is like a doubling. Just consider it a doubling, right? The lily pads doubling. One turns into two, two turns into four, four turns into eight, on and on and on. That tends to be how nature works. If you look at like cell division, and if you look at like, the way nature operates, there's a million different examples of this. And so I'm like, if you look at that, plus the simple fact that like, so if you're just trying to get 1% better every day, well, add that up over thousands of days in your life, and it's a pretty powerful thing, right? And it's a great mindset or idea of just, I don't need to be radically better tomorrow, just a little bit better. Well, how do I do that? For me, I had somebody say something to me that was like one of those things where in the moment, like if you were listening in, you'd have been like, it would just came and went. You wouldn't even have thought much of what was said. To me, it like hit me like a ton of bricks. And my friend said something like, um, seek, seek joy, like seek happiness. I forget how she said it, but what landed for me was like, wait, how do I know what I should be doing in this world? Well, her point was, do what makes you happy first and foremost. Well, after leading people for a few decades here, like I've come to realize that like if you can line up people's what you need in your organization with what makes people happy, they're naturally going to do amazing freaking work, right? So it's just kind of uncovering, or sometimes it's just creating a narrative where you're lining up what they didn't realize made them happy, but you put it in a context that does line up with joy, and they will do crazy stuff on their own, like just without being pushed or pressed. And so I asked myself in a line, like kind of in back to your statement around 1% better every day is I can't really quantify that. Um, but what I can quantify is am I feeling joy today, or am I
Yes.
chasing more joy? Am I chasing more happiness? And what I've also come to realize at 50 years old is joy and happiness are not devoid, or they're not mutually exclusive from difficulty and
Uh-huh.
challenge and even pain. Like I get more joy making it through a very painful, difficult thing than I do from, you know, cruising on easy street, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of a mind shift and just saying what does make me happy. Well, I know for me, my personality gets a lot of joy from overcoming challenges that most people run away from. You know, like I get a lot of fucking joy from that. So
Yeah.
therefore, what happens when I wake up and I have a fucked up situation happening in my life or in my business or whatever it is, instead of going, damn it, universe is just against me, I'm like, oh, universe is giving me another opportunity for joy. I just got to figure out how to get there, right? I just got to put that into my equation, right? Put that ingredient in the dish, like this ingredient of, oh no, there's joy attached to this. If I
Yeah.
already know that challenge equals joy, and then compounded joy when the outcome is beneficial for many, right? Like, and you start playing with these things, and you realize that our all we are as little, as human beings, are little sensory organisms for source, right? Like we are just this one fractal experiencing a little piece of all of it at once, right? And so therefore, perception is everything. And if perception is everything, how do I start to change my perception in a way at which lines up with the ultimate positive sum game for my life, right? Like, what is that? How does that play out? Sure, I'm human, dude. Like, I have bad days and shit pisses me off, right? But more likely these days is that I'm quickly going, wait, of course, is that old saying is like, oh, challenge is opportunity for growth. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, it's great, but it's hard to internalize that when you're going through it. More so for me, I'm like, I'm just going back to this feeling instead of intellectualizing. I've spent most of my life intellectualizing things, rationalizing things. Now I'm getting more associating more closely with how things feel. Where if I can go and bring up the feeling of happiness, or for me, it's even more like, wait, dude, like you signed up to start a company, help lead a company, be a part of growing a company. Like companies don't exist unless they're solving problems, right? Like that is it's just, the business is a series of solving of problems
Mm-hmm.
that you're solving or challenges you're overcoming or whatever. I'm like, I signed up for this. And sometimes I'll get the feeling of like, dude, I'm just playing the board game. Like this is like it's of course it's reality, and of course you got to take it seriously. And do I have to be so personally attached to like how can I manage my feelings through that? So I think back to your bringing it back to your 1% every day is like, can I wake up every day and go, where do I get joy? What is bringing me happiness? How do I stay on that road? Right? I can't predict everything, but can I stay on a road of like, okay, cool. Whatever happens today, I'm in my happy place, Even
Yeah.
shitty things. Like I've the last month I've had some of the shittiest stuff I've ever dealt with in my life come up. And it's way less emotionally taxing these days as compared to before, because I think I'm more just like, oh, it's just part of the universe is giving me, like if I'm just built, maybe it's just some crazy story and I'm just, creating that helps me stay in the right perspective on things. And but even that is proven to be some version of reality. Quantum mechanics, quantum physics is basically showing that we are projecting our own reality in real time. And so even if I am placeboing my way into it, I don't care because it's still getting the outcome I want. And that is that, like, oh, cool, opportunity for me to there's I'm on my road to happiness, and if I'm on that happiness road and operating from my highest purpose, and this big heavy gnarly thing shows up, I guess it's there for a reason. And so instead of being like, oh, why me? You're more like, oh, fuck yeah, let's go. It's like being a motocross rider and complaining that there's fucking bumps on the track. Like, no, those are jumps, bro. Like, those are
Yeah.
fun. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I think that's such a good way to looking at it too, because I don't know. I think we can get so caught up in like the day-to-day part of it, of truly like the to-do list, the checkbox, because the reality hits, and you do have to do some stuff for a business. You have to
Fuck
knock
yeah.
out things, right? And there's that balance of like, hey, am I feeling good about this? Or those days where you're like, fuck it, I don't want to do any of that stuff. You still kind of got to do it, but it's how you approach it. And I think that the timeline and the ability to kind of settle into it and know that, hey, this one might be stressful, this one might be better, like just kind of accepting it. I feel like it also increases the patience side of it, because you just know that this is going to be part of the process,
Dude,
that
it's that
y-
reframe thing that you and I were
yeah,
talking about a while back where, okay, so let's just say I've got a series of things I've got to do that don't, if I look at them in a vacuum, I don't want to do them.
yep.
I'm not in the mood for it. That's not definitely not bringing me happiness right now. Okay, but what I can sometimes do, again, I'm working on getting more effective at this, but what I can do sometimes is go, wait, however, me doing this is bringing somebody else efficiency, happiness, joy. Like when these things are done, they're like killer. Thank you. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, a guy like me who has a big part of my personality is about wanting to support and serve people. If I can reframe what seems like menial bullshit that I don't want to do and go, but this is super important to somebody else and super valuable for somebody else. And I go, okay. So instead of me going, I'm doing this just because, I think part of where we get lost in task, back to the micro,
Mm-hmm.
is because we lose context. So I'm constantly working on my psychological, working on myself psychologically to recontextualize things or reframe to where I go, okay, if I look at, I've got to do these because I've got to do them. And that's this little, uh, self-centered kind of thing. Yeah, dude, it's hard to get me to do shit like that. But the minute I go, no, dude, how many lives are going to be touched? Yes, very lightly, very minutely, but how many lives get improved through you just taking action on this list? And I think through that and I go, okay, cool. And then I get excited. And I'm like, okay, I'm back on the road to happiness.
Do you do
Like
anything to prep? Like, so for example, in usually the day before, I mean, the night before any next day, I'll kind of, I wouldn't call it visualization, but I'll kind of visualize what blocks do I want to move that day, and how do I get myself in a mental state to kind of perform at my highest every day, whatever that day may bring. You can't plan it to the day. I don't think that, from this time to this time, I'm going to be like on it. Nobody can plan that, but it's more like, am I prepared for just mindset wise for the day to come? Do you do any of that prep?
for sure. Well, so I used to do, I mean, over the years, I've gone through lots of it, iterations on those types of behaviors, right? Building like it worked really, really well for me for a long time to where I'd go the top three things that I got to get done tomorrow. Everything else is gravy, right? Like everything else is just icing on the cake. Like I just those three things. And so what would happen is I knew that once I got those three things done, that I had already lived a meaningful day, right? And then pretty soon I got better at adding two or three things onto that list of three. You don't want, it worked well for me to start very small. Just like, dude, because, the day comes at you, as you said, you can never totally predict. That worked really well for me. And I still may go back to that at some point. Currently, my practice is each morning I go through a version of surrender, or think of it as like a forgiving of everyone and everything, just a letting go, just letting everything off the hook, like carrying no grievances, no baggage from the past, none, like literally none. Like I mean, I'm really honest with myself. Like, no, dude, you're still freaking holding. You're saying the words, but you're still hanging on to that shit, right? And so, getting to a point where I can truly let it go and start today like I'm a brand new baby in this world with no baggage of bullshit from the past. I mean, that's decades of work to get to where that actually, when I say that, I mean it. But so a little bit of surrender and clearing of the deck. Then I go into a space of gratitude for what is. Just being aware and conscious of what is, not what needs to be or what should be better or what I wish. Just full blown acceptance for what is. And then I move into a bit of a in the in religion or spiritual circles they call it faith. I tend to like to call it belief, just an imagining of what is, a belief in what is yet to come. So a bit of a manifestation. sometimes it's crystal clear and I'm working on a particular thing. And sometimes it's a little bit amorphous. It's a little bit more like just like I've been, as you know, Karina's going through a lot of hardship because of the big event we had here at the company that was almost entirely out of our control. I've just been telling Karina, like, a miracle's coming. Like, I can tell, I can feel it. Like, we're going through this incredible challenge right now, but I feel like something big's coming. Yes, I actually feel that. And yes, I'm also stating something because I want it to be that way, right? Like, I believe that that's real. I don't know how it all works. I know it sounds, to some a little bit like woo woo, or whatever. But for me, it's I have evidence of that working in my life. What I expect tends to show up, a version of it, and the challenge for us as humans, I think, is that it oftentimes doesn't show up exactly like you thought it would, and so you got to be very present and aware to see, oh shoot, that is the miracle. And in a lot of ways, I just had this long conversation with Karina last night. In a lot of ways, this event of essentially a large sum of money being fraudulently stolen from the company has already created in a very short time something that we've been putting a lot of time and effort into trying to create through systems and processes, which is this evolution of consciousness for the leadership of the company, just kind of them. And so in conversation last night, Karina and I are going through this whole scenario and how it's all playing out. And I'm going, gosh, I'm watching people elevate. Like, it's funny. And for whatever reason, I brought up an analogy of the first time I saw my dad cry. It kind of burned in my brain. I was probably 8 or 9 years old and he was running this little family business, and I don't know what happened. I don't remember exactly, but I think he probably just didn't have enough money to pay the bills and it just broke him down. He worked his brains out to try to provide for us. And I think he was just having a hard time. And I just saw him cry. And I remember thinking, like, in that moment, I didn't know how to articulate it, but the feeling as I look back was, oh shit. If Superman can cry, that's a tough world out there. Like, they're like, I went from like, and it sounds a little bit like a bad thing, like, oh, the kid has to realize that the world's a big scary place, but it wasn't. It was a good thing. It was like, oh crap, like the world's hard. As a kid, I think sometimes it's just like rainbows and lollipops, and I was just like, oh shit, like, this is real. Like, Superman is crying right now. That's who he was to me. And I was sharing with Karina that I think that's a little bit of what's happening at a certain level in the company, is like, she is seen as like damn near infallible, like pretty exacting, highly proficient.
Crusher. Absolute crusher.
She's a machine. Like, I do a lot of crazy magical stuff, but she, from just a pure execute standpoint, like, on a more day to day, is just phenomenal. I mean, she's just a rare human like that. And I think people are going, oh shit, Superwoman is crying, like, whoa. And I think I'm watching people acknowledge that and go, holy crap, that's not just, let's put it in real terms, that's not just $500,000. That's $10 million worth of projects to get that $500,000. Okay, but then if you really contextualize it and go, to have that freed up capital sitting there, it actually has worked its way all the way through all the company mechanics. That's really kind of like net profit sitting there. That's more like $300 million worth of business to get that $500,000 just sitting there, right? Gone like that. And so I think people are starting to go, oh, whoa, it's hard to get and really easy to lose. And so I'm just watching some behavioral adjustments for people, or thinking, I'm listening to people go, wait, do we really need that? Or wait, let's be more efficient here. Or holy crap, I don't have to bring every one of my problems to Karina. Like, I can answer most of these myself, and they're taking more ownership in things, and we were working hard on how to implement a system and a process to do that, which we still will. But in one event, this massive shift occurred for a lot of people, I think, and simultaneously, I think she's starting to feel a lot more support where she wasn't, where people were going, hey, I got you. And we all go through seasons in our growth and evolution and leadership and business and, all the things in our roles, everything. And sometimes what seems like an incredibly fucked up bad event actually has a lot of beauty in it, And there's a million analogies, the lightning strike in the forest that nobody sees, it starts a fire and burns everything down, really clears the deck to create new life and a whole new growth and a whole new ecosystem or whatever, And so it's just part of life. And I think that, yeah, I think that we need to be open to the idea that we don't yet really, and I don't know that we ever will truly understand what it is we actually need in a given moment. And if we can move into some level of acceptance and gratitude and belief in good, good meaning not in judgment of good or bad, but just good in the growth, or good in heading in the direction of where we're called to be as individuals. It takes a lot of that emotionality, or that mental anguish out of things, where you're just like, okay, like I had a period of my life where I don't know what I was doing, a lot of spiritual work, and I got all zenned out, and I was just like, I went around all day long, just everything that happened, I was like, everything's perfect. Oh, that's perfect. Happened for a reason. Like, I mean, even, everything. And it really created this flow for me, like a flow state that was really interesting. So,
What's so interesting about this story, specifically in the organization, is like it's seeing the reaction from everybody, as you mentioned. Like it's this, you kind of, once it happens, right? It's like, what do you do from there? And I think that's those are one of those inflection points. And I think that speaks to, I guess, that core belief that I think there's a split in humanity, if you will. I mean, when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Star Wars when I was a kid, and you have, light side, dark side kind of idea. But I think the way that really reflects in society and or the workplace, personal, whatever, is you have this core belief: are people inherently good or inherently selfish? Like are we born to be in community or to take care of ourselves, survival of the fittest? And it's a fascinating conversation, because I've found that permeates into the culture of companies. Usually it's, if you believe humans are inherently good, it's that we're going to endure this, we're going to band around, we're going to be a community around this, and here's how it's going to go. The other is, we're going to make it at all costs. Both do have success stories, but I found it's a wild split in how
hey,
to approach culture.
I'm trying to organize my thoughts. I have so much to share on this. I've spent a lot of time on the same concept, right? Also a big fan of George Lucas, and I went back and even tried to figure out who he was reading or what he was like paying attention to create such a deeply meaningful storyline that was so biblical almost in its analogy, and
Samurais.
it's just this whole idea of good and bad, light and dark, force, even getting into the force, and what does that mean? I mean, just beautiful story, right? If you really look at it like at a deeper level. Here's a couple thoughts that come to mind for me. I have pondered what makes. Okay, I took the statement. I think it was from Shakespeare that all man only has the ability to operate, or to take action from what they believe is good. We have the inability to actually take action was bad. So you go, okay, well, take the right. That's obviously a bad thing. In that person's mind, they believed what they were doing was good. Now, here's where it gets interesting. It was good for them. They wanted to do it. It was good for them and them only, pretty much nobody else, right? So then I go, okay, how do we organize or order what is actually good or not good or bad? And I think the more people it's good for, the better it is. Okay, so when I take action that is not good to the world, it's typically highly self-centered, or maybe based in self-centered fear, right? And therefore, it's good for me in that moment to tell you off or tell you you're a piece of shit or whatever, but it's only good for me. It's not good for anybody else, right? And so I started to kind of create this contextualization of this concept in the more it's good for, more people, more things, more that it actually has a positive outcome for, the higher the good really is, right? So, where that leads me is then back to a core concept that I have about business. And I didn't come up with this idea. It was something I read somewhere, and then I just went deeper on it in my own thinking. But that there's really only two mindsets that you are ever holding at any given time. One of two, right? And that is either the creative mindset or the competitive mindset. And that's it. And so businesses that are based in the competitive mindset will succeed because they're competing for market share or price or whatever it is. They're competing for it. So they can do well, but eventually they'll fail. Eventually they'll slow down. there'll be burnout on their teams, or their product will come outmoded, or somebody will find a better way to price things, do it cheaper, whatever. Whereas the creative mindset is one that says, how do we create? Instead of fighting over our slice of the pie, let's just figure out how to bake pies. Fucking hand them out. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't need to fight over the slice. Let's build an oven together and make as many pies as we want. Like, that's a stupid, simple, analogy for it. But that, I think, companies that are started with and their culture is imbued with the concept of creative versus competitive, that shows up everywhere between roles. You're not competing with the person that has the same title as you. You're collaborating with them. You're creating with them. There's a synergistic effect. Or you're not competing in the market. You're collaborating and creating with others for others. Or what to some might look like a competitor, you go, how do we work with them? How do I evolve my company to where I can provide a service to them where we can work together and do a lot of great things, right? Or even in a simple aspect of, we might be forced into a truly competitive role. We're bidding. That company's bidding on the same thing we're bidding on. How does my bid process help them learn and grow and get better over time? How does you know what I mean? Like, it's just, again, a reframe. Oh, we lost that bid. That can be a competitive mindset. Or you can say, hey, how did they do that? How did they do the same project for cheaper than we are? What do we need to learn to get better, right? Or how do we market our true value, which is maybe we're not cheaper, but we're faster, or we're more communicative, or we're more client-centric, right? Again, you've heard these things at MYNT. That's what we double down on, as opposed to just getting cheaper. You know what I'm saying? The zero-sum thing of, or a race to the bottom, like, we don't play in that space. And that's just because it's just born out of some thinking that said, I would rather have a company that's in the creative mindset than the competitive one. And then the people that show up and have helped shape and grow this company all believe in that as well, right? So you start with a core thesis that then just attracts people that subscribe to that core thesis, and then it becomes your culture. So it's like, they say, oh, the culture comes from the founder. Yeah, at some very granular seed in the ground level, yeah, but that's it. It's an idea, and then people that subscribe to that idea come and make it, continue to propagate and prosper from it. So I remind myself, am I coming? Typically, you can identify if you're coming from the creative mindset or the competitive mindset in just asking yourself, am I operating from fear? Fear of loss? Fear, is the ego, being threatened? Am I, fearful of the outcome? There's unsurety, or am I operating from creative, which is everything works out for the best? Take risks, or be bold, or be humble in your process. I mean, for me, it's often that I'm going, wait, this isn't about you. You know what I mean? This is about everybody else. And can I just be a vehicle for supporting the growth of that's something that's good for many? And so one of the things I ask myself in the morning, back to the process, is, if my core purpose in life is to inspire positive change, how many people can I reach today with that? How can I show up inspiring positive change? Sometimes very, very small. It's just little things. It's like looking at how the way something's being done and go, hey, what if we tried this? Sometimes it's macro, and it's like, dude, where does this company really need to go in the next 3 years to serve its highest, best use, which is creating positive change for as many people and as many things as possible. And then just reverse engineering that. Again, deeply esoteric stuff here, but yeah, I mean,
I love the esoteric stuff because I think it's all sitting in the back of our minds, like the whole time. It's you have your day to day, and then you have your other thoughts when you're not doing your day to day, and those are the esoteric thoughts. And I think anybody who says they don't have them is completely lying. And then it's figuring out, like, where do we sit in this world? And I think that's such an interesting thing because, you take from I think when people are making career decisions, right, or whatever business they want to start or whatever business they're working in, they're like, man, I want to have more impact. I want to be doing in this. And they go for like we call it the open AI, the Apple, that like, I want to be the big person, when you don't necessarily affect as many lives at that level as you can in a more niche organization, like directly. It's a very
right?
interesting perspective.
That Apple I mean, there's a handful, but two that come to mind are like Henry Ford. When, basically at the time, people that worked in a factory were indentured servants or slaves to some extent, right? Not living wage, terrible conditions. At the time it was normal to work, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. And Ford comes along and says, no, 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 that's not right. I want to value these people. I want to give them. So he created the 5-day work week and, the 8-hour day and living wage and educational programs and childcare systems within his company. Changed the game, right?
And they
And
weren't that big when he did that.
pretty young and pretty new. And then, guys like the Dodge brothers tried to sue him for saying, hey, you're creating an unfair, advantage. You're attracting all these workers and we're stuck having to, try to, and that's not, it shouldn't be legal. Right. That's why I won't buy a Dodge. Just like, that's how weird I and I love Fords. But no, and then if you look at Apple as another example, now I don't know what it's like to work for Apple, be a part of Apple, but I think from a world changing, creating technology and interface that the world was fundamentally changed forever because of Steve Jobs' vision and many others around him, obviously. However, what I look at for me personally in this company or in my business trajectory was I don't know that I'm a guy that really wants to take that on, to try to take on scale at that magnitude. I feel like I would lose something along the way. So what I did is I reframed it to where I go, okay, how do I have a similar impact? How do I aim at a similar impact without having to be so massive? Where I don't love that Apple's products are so important to our lives, but yet they're still made by slave labor in China. Like that, I don't jive with that. And that's something that I couldn't live with. I couldn't be the Apple guy. I mean, not to say, again, don't get me wrong. I don't imagine that I even have the capacity to do that. But I'm just saying, if I were to get, when you're starting a company, you're looking at like these kind of ideas. Is like, do we go from massive? Do we want to be a national company at this level, blah, 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 or do we want? And my answer was, wait, what if we could be the example? What if we could pioneer concepts or ideas or ways of doing things that would inform companies to come or companies that already existed that were massive, that did reach 100 times, 1,000 times more people than we did, but they were looking at it going, whoa, we got to be careful. Like, be the innovator, be the disruptor, and so my thing is like, we don't need to be the biggest company in our industry or in our space. And we don't even need to be the best. We just need to be different. We need to look at things from a different angle. So again, it's back to that creative mindset versus competitive. So
I think you question a lot whether your capability can be at that level, can operate at that level. And I think you reach a certain point where you go, yeah, I can operate at that level, but is it worth the inherent cost that comes with it? Because with a bigger business and more scale is more problems to solve and more.
Laced into that is my personal, am I on the road to my happiness? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No,
yeah.
Me personally, now somebody may come along and take leadership of this company where they understand scale and management at scale, and that is their freaking happiness, man. That may be the case, right? But for me, it's not. And so I've always liked the idea of being nimble and light on our feet and innovative and, and able to be different and therefore then be that spark of a new revolution. You don't need to be the conflagration or the fire of revolution. Just be the spark, right? And that's always resonated with me. And so do I or could I have, nurtured the capacity to be that, leader at scale? Maybe, but I'm more interested in looking deeply at myself and saying, what is the thing that makes me happy? What is my purpose? What are the talents and gifts that I was born with that I don't even have anything to do with? It was just the luck of the draw for me. But how do I capitalize on those? And then how do I be so humble as to acknowledge my weaknesses or the things that I don't do naturally well and find people that that's their superpowers, right? So, and then in between is how do I find people that are a little bit of both, that if I can help coach and mentor and be a part of their growth, they can even be more dynamic than me because they have a little bit of this stuff They have enough of what the things that I see as my superpowers, and they have a little bit of the stuff that's my weakness. And what would happen if they were empowered to be leadership? What would that look like? You're an example of that, right? And so, I think it's just being interest. I think it's being, and not everybody is, right? And so again, it's okay if you're not, right? Because you just got to tap into what it is, the thing that does motivate you and drive you. But for those of us that love that deep introspection, I think there's a humility in it. There's that you cultivating the gratitude that's totally required, and then it's being really, really honest, and that is part of the humility. Humility is being really honest with yourself.
Well, and to round this out too, a little bit of like, kind of connected to what we do. I think we're at this like crazy inflection point of what our society can look like from an infrastructural perspective. I mean, there's a lot of discussion around like, was urban planning of the United States super awesome when we did it? Sure. Is it serving us now? Debatable. I think you have this opportunity with technology and scale and humanity and everything happening that we can design cities, life differently. But what comes with that is energy, because we did an energy infrastructure that was like, here's how we're going to do it. It's based on automotive. It's based on these buildings. It's based on city hubs and then suburbs and then strip malls. And like, that was like the urban development side. And I know that you early on in life were very interested in wanting to be an architect. What do you think of just like development in general, where we're at in terms of like an overall urban development of how we live now, regardless of energy, but just in general?
There's a funny statement that I heard not that long ago that was like, and it goes in line with what I was saying about the idea of being good. It's good for who, right? If it's just you, it's probably not great. It has to be good for many or more than just you in order to actually be good. I think everybody's trying to improve the world or save the world. It's just we're arguing over how to do it, right? So some people believe that dropping a freaking atom bomb on somebody is part of saving the world. That's their version of how to do it, right? Most of us would look at that and go, that's not the right way to do it, but they believe it to be true. And so I think at the end of the day, the infrastructure that was developed was absolutely fantastic given the circumstances and the time. And yet it served those who used it most or could profit from it most. And I think that the thing that goes wrong is when we get too married to an idea without letting it be loose enough to be evolved or iterated on. I also think that so I think to answer your question, where we're at is this beautiful place. I think it's beautiful. I don't subscribe to the idea that the world's going to blow up anytime soon, right? I do subscribe to the idea that we're fucking shit up, right? That we don't need to be fucking up, right? I do believe that we can become more conscious, more aware, more efficient, more respectful of the thing and the place that actually serves us and supports all life, right? And if I look at nature, I use nature as a backdrop for how I'm seeing the world. Nature at its unadulterated, untouched state. And it seems to me that you can, from a human viewpoint, look at nature and see some version of a hierarchy of importance. The river might be more important than the mushroom, that's growing on the riverbank, right? But if you really carefully, it's probably not, right? They need each other. And so when I hear the word decentralized, it really gets me excited, right? I think that part of what's wrong geopolitically is a centralized, whether it be the banking system driving geopolitics or the military industrial complex or centralized governments, of these primary, countries. When I start looking at our infrastructure, when I contemplate our infrastructure here in the United States, because it's what I'm most aware of, it's too centralized for where we are as human beings, for what's occurred, the evolution of our existence as human beings in this country. Decentralization of power, both figuratively and actively, is the challenge. And so when I look at what we do as a company carefully, it is about a decentralization of power, the energy that we use. It's also a decentralization of decision making or, currently we came up, I grew up in an idea that the utility company, you just had to buy your energy from them, right? Or you lived in a cabin and had a wood-fired stove and no power, right? What we're starting to explore as a society is the idea that we have more control over how we get power, how we use power. And what we do as a company is a part of decentralizing that power structure, which I think has this both a top down, the work we do has the ability to create more decentralized utilization as a tail on it, but it also has this reflective nature backed up to the power structure, let's call it political or capital or whatever it might be, where they're having to adapt and decentralize more as well. So conceptually, without being too esoteric with this, is just that I like the idea of decentralized leadership. I like the idea of decentralized, power, decentralized decision making. I love the idea of independence. I love the idea of individual sovereignty, yet being part of a collective. If you look at the way communities at the right scale function, everybody plays a part and it's equally important. And some people gravitate toward being a guiding voice to directions of that organization or that community or whatever. And some people don't have as much of a voice in that, but they play an equally valuable role. And it's much like reflected in a company done right. And so I think the reason I gravitated towards architecture was just because I like objects, I like geometry, I like physical things, and I like creating new ways of approaching how space is used. Again, I still do that. If you watch, my office gets rearranged every few months just because I'm playing with feel and the way things move. And so I think it speaks to, I heard I went through a phase in my life where I went through all of Tony Robbins. I bought the CDs, for like $300. It was a big purchase for me at the time. I was broke, but I was like, I didn't go to college. I'm going to invest in myself. And I just went through this whole Tony Robbins thing. While I would drive to my appointments, I would just listen to Tony Robbins. And what he talks a little bit about where you think, imagining where you could be in life by using what it was you wanted to be when you were a kid as an example, or how does that play out right now? Not directly. So let's just say, as an example, there was a time when I was a kid that I wanted to be a geologist. I was really into like rocks and cool, different rocks and gems and stuff. And at that time in my early 20s, I looked back and said, well, what does that mean to where I want to be in my life? Well, I like to find and uncover and find and bring out cool things. That's what I got to remember about myself. That's inherently part of who I am, is I like to uncover something and be like, ta-da, like, look world, look how cool this is, right? If I look at when I want to be an architect, what does that mean for me now? Well, it's that I like to design experience. I like to create something that has value to people's experience. What is that? How can that show up in my life now, right? And so when we look at the infrastructure, I think we can't be mad at it. I think when you operate from fear, guilt, resentment, you're not creative. You're back in the competitive mindset. Yep. When we want to blame the people of the past for setting up a fucked up system, you're not moving forward. What you need to do is go, they did the best they could with the circumstances they were in. Even the fact that they might have been born greedy and they were trying to get as much profit as they could, and that's why they did it. Who cares? Let them off the hook. That's just how they were. What do we do with it now? Yes. How do we use what came before us for good? How do we launch from this launch pad that was built? And so I don't like the idea of blaming everybody that came before us for effing up the world. I think we're more like, what do we do to create paradigm shift? So that's what it boils down to for me and for this company, is like, how do we create paradigm shift? How do we inspire positive change?
Energy specifically is a very interesting topic to me also, just because I think it's one of those ones that it's a domino effect that happens with all the other things that are associated. Like if you think about where a lot of inequity in the world could be, it's related to food, basic human rights, stuff like that. Generally, if you look on a timeline or geopolitically, those that have access to energy have a lot of those other problems solved too, which is very interesting to see. Like, how can you have a bigger toppling effect from going to the top level?
Totally, dude. Here's a way to contextualize it. What do they say the biggest change in the long arc of mankind has been? The discovery of fire, right? What is fire? It's energy. It's our ability to harness and utilize energy outside of just the sun. Some could argue that began the downfall of man it's greed and, and control. But it's very easy to argue that was the breakthrough of modern society, right? So therefore, you extrapolate that all the way forward to where we are now. The next big breakthrough would be free energy, right? Free and equal access to energy across all mankind, all life, right? Well, we have that with the sun. So we're in this intermediate stage where solar is capturing the sunlight and turning it directly into energy. It's pretty, amazing thing. However, what does it look like when energy is no longer a resource that is a part of a financial system that is ultimately, in a lot of ways, a system of control, or at least a system of stratification, those that have and those that have not. And so the idea that decentralized, or even at some point, whether it's cold fusion or whatever it is, that it becomes less of a commodity to be bought and sold, and something that is just inherent, right? Sure, go back to the caveman days. Somebody had to find the wood and figure out how to do the spark. So you had to work for it, but I mean, it was basically available to anyone. And I think that we have gone through a phase where capitalism, has driven a lot of, on one hand, you could say, how awesome is it? Somebody had the idea to provide energy to the masses, where if you were at a certain point in American history, didn't have power in your home, and all of a sudden there was the ability for you to pay a few bucks, and have power come to your home, that was a
Huge.
thank the Lord,
Huge.
right?
Yeah.
It added
My grandmother actually she remembered, she grew up in Livermore, and she told me when they first got electricity, she goes, and she told me it so many times visually. She just said, like, I will never forget the night when we got electricity. My brothers were hooting and hollering upstairs, and it was like this late night of you had lights on at all times. She goes, it was amazing. It was magic.
What a neat story.
And it always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's so, it's so easy to look back and go, wow, some capitalists, wanted to sell power for it and make money. No, they needed the money in order to keep the power on, right? They're providing a service to so many that changed everything, right? So again, if you come from a positive mindset on things, or wrap it in at the truest intention of what it was, all we're looking at is, how do we get better? So you're right back to your beginning point. How do you get 1% better? How do we look at what is new instead of just relying on the old? What's a version of that in the future that's even better? I love being a part of that.
Nice.
I love being a part of that. Yeah, in our little way, and sometimes a little idea has big impact, and or sometimes a big idea can be executed by the smallest and nimblest in a way at which informs, a whole paradigm shift.
100%.
Yeah, that's what I think we're after here. No. Energy is inherently a part of everything we do in our lives, but one of the least understood things.
By giving people agency around their energy, around power, you are giving them power.
This is a moment in time with technological advancement that allows for humans to take advantage of the free aspect of energy.
I can see a future where there is limitless and free energy. And that's a pretty beautiful world to live in.